the jury has reached a verdict, and we are just on the edge of our seats here, Lester. Everyone is starting to realize the historic moment that is before us right now.
We are starting to hear that there are guilty verdicts. From our producer inside, we're hearing guilty on 1 through 5. 1 through 12, we have now 13, 14 guilty. They're saying guilty on all 34 charges.
The judge had just said that the jury could not reach a decision and that we would be dismissed for the day. Some reporters actually gathered their stuff and was starting to leave. And then the judge came and basically said, my mistake, we just got a note saying there's a verdict. Sitting in that courtroom, you really did have a sense of the weight of history. It was dead silent. The pressure was, you could see it on everyone's face, even the reporters. The only one that didn't seem to register it was Donald Trump. I mean, some defendants have that look of, I'm going to jail. He had that look of, I'm going to dinner. I mean, he was, I was amazed.
His face was red, and that he sort of reached out to his son's wrist to shake it, and kind of almost missed. And they're both describing it as a sort of sad and an emotional moment for anyone in the room.
One juror appeared to look at him out of the corner of his eye. I'm fairly certain that's the juror who the Trump team had seen, or Trump allies had thought was on Trump's side, and kept channeling that. There was just silence. I think that everybody was stunned around Trump, including Trump himself.
Practically speaking, if you're that one of 12 and you get in that jury room and you find that, oh, I'm the only one who doesn't agree with my 11 fellow jurors, those folks, I don't think, tend to hold out for too long. I think that just mass psychology is that, well, at least I better listen to what they have to say. I'm convincible. I'm somebody with an open mind. I said I was someone with an open mind. And when you have one or two in the minority like that, I don't think it takes too long. Maybe that's why they read back the testimony to say, hey, Steve, are you convinced now? Maybe your memory is refreshed. Are you with us? And that's probably why this happened.
This is a gut punch. We want to see politicians fight. We don't want to see what they do in third world countries, to have one side start indicting and jailing the other side.
From here on in, Donald Trump, the ultimate brander, the guy that gave you Little Marco or Lion Ted, is simply branded convicted felon Donald Trump. He's in the most simplistic way. From here on in, the other side has the ability to take the great brander and brand him in the most simplistic term, convicted felon. And that's powerful.
Speaking of sexism, if there's one person I'm thinking of tonight when we hear this verdict, it's my former boss, Hillary Clinton, who warned us over and over again, who was treated like she was the criminal in 2016 when Donald Trump at that time was engaged in this felonious scheme. And I think the history books need to note that absolutely. That is so important.
Despite the initial statements trying to politicize this verdict, saying that it was somehow partisan or Democrats or what have you, Donald Trump was convicted by a jury of his peers that were people here in New York.
I would be floored if a Manhattan judge sentenced an elderly first offender in a nonviolent case to jail. It would just be absurd. But there's a lot of absurd moments in this trial. I'm still hoping that Merchan shows a modicum of restraint here and says, this is the leading presidential candidate. Let's create a system here that's workable. He's likely to face fines. That's at a minimum. I would bet against jail. There's other options. You know, you could have home confinement. You could have weekend confinement.
In the most serious FBR cases, a sentence of imprisonment is routinely imposed. This is the most serious falsifying business records case in the history of the state of New York. I think Alvin Bragg is going to ask for a sentence of incarceration, and I think Judge Merchan will very seriously weigh that.
So the special treatment, you're saying, would be if he were not given a prison sentence.
Right.
The strongest grounds for appeal are what?
So I think the top grounds for appeal is the fact that we had a state court here, a state prosecutor, enforcing, in part, a federal election crime for the first time, actually, in U.S. history.
I think the other issue that is out there that will probably catch the attention of some judge on an appellate court will be the due process issue and how the charges are laid out. I mean, we believe in our system that a defendant has a right to be put on notice of the specific things that he or she would have to defend themselves against. That means that an indictment generally spells out the specific charge, how you did it, what implement you did it with, who you did it to. This was a little willy-nilly in when they got to this second crime. So you remember they took this state statute that was a misdemeanor, they made it a felony, they enhanced it by saying, well, he intended to violate another law. But they never really went into and explained what he was alleged to have violated.
We cannot just sit on our hands. We can't just complain about it, as important as all of that stuff is. We have to be willing to fight back. We need to be subpoenaing Judge Merchan and his daughter. We need to understand what are the connections between big Democratic money and this sham prosecution. Did George Soros ever talk to Alvin Bragg about using his power to go after Donald Trump? We need to get to the bottom of it, and when we find wrongdoing, we need to be willing to actually punish it. That is the only language that I think these people are going to understand.
These Democrats will rue the day they decided to use lawfare to stop a presidential candidate. You just wait, and it won't be Hunter Biden the next time. It's going to be Joe Biden. It could potentially still be Barack Obama. It could still potentially be Hillary Clinton. We're going to have to look at what the statutes of limitations are.